You mind if you take the lead?
If what?
You take the lead.
Sure. I don't know why it's not going live though.
So,
You don't have permission to live stream. What do I need permission for? I wonder if it's because of my timeline. Let's see. Learning. I don't know at all. Okay, so I don't know that we can live stream.
oh, did you just? Oh, you didn't.
Did I just what?
I thought you just got us on.
No. So
what?
So buttons. Okay, so let's
juvenile.
All right, well, we're not live streaming, so let's just take it from here.
Well, but we'll be able to play it back and then we'll be able to see what we think of it.
Yes, so this is being recorded.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I would like to introduce Dr. Bill Mock here, and I are going to be starting a podcast and a blog and a vodcast blog, something with that. Yeah. We're going to stream all over.
Yes.
And so, so I've known Bill for 14 years. And so I'll let you tell him a little bit about himself. Bill?
Okay. I'm a professional. I'm a professional helper. I have been licensed and doing clinical work for about 55 years, which means that as you look at me and you say, well, honest to God, he can't be that old. But I am. And and one of the reasons that I'm here and one of the reasons that I want to do this is because I've got a whole lot of experience in doing the right thing and even more experience in doing the wrong things. And one of the things that I found now in my later years in practice is that people somehow see there's some benefit in my sharing both. And I happened to be very lucky about 14 years ago to meet a really nice lady who evolved into this really great kind of, well, I should mention she's an influencer who has similar interests to my own. And truth be told, when an opportunity came up to do this podcast, I jumped at it. And now it's my turn to introduce iLoNa. And I can't say enough about this nice lady. She sold me my house. She's been a good friend for 14 years. And she has been, we have been taking this journey together for these last 14 years. So this is iLoNa, and she's going to introduce herself.
Hi there. I am iLoNa PoKa. I am a multipreneur and a business owner. I have been passionate about mental health for a really long time. I think my whole life, really, with my degree in psychology and my own personal development work that I've done, and with, you know, some of you know that I've started working with women who have experienced childhood trauma, and we want to get our knowledge out and funny jokes and to the world, and you know, make a difference and let people know that you know, they don't have to have everything figured out, and there are some life tools and techniques that we get to share with them. And you know, that will fulfill your life more. It has fulfilled our lives more, in the good and the bad.
Yes, ma'am. Do you want me to build on that?
Sure.
Okay. we were talking before we went on camera about our personal experiences and what it is that we wanted to do here. And while we said different things, it was interesting how they were the same thing ultimately, and they dovetailed. But one of the things that I brought up was that the history, the training that I got about not giving people directives or homework assignments or that kind of thing, but that some of the things we're going to suggest in this work have to do with not so much homework, but experiments. And they're ways of learning more about yourself and maybe learning more about ways to be better self. So think of them as experiments, do them if you will. And if you do them, you can't do them right or wrong because they're experiments, but you can learn something from them. So you're always going to be a success. And we probably need to give you the other kind of organizing principle that we've thought up. And that is that every time we do one of these podcasts, we're going to kind of organize it around some kind of inspirational quote. So there'll be some principle or some thought that then drives our discussion. Also, you need to know that we tend to want to do discussions, and we want to use that kind of format between us. So every once in a while, you'll note that we ignore you and that we really get into whatever it is that we're talking about. We don't mind your eavesdropping. In fact, we hope you will. Yes, and there's more. And I just drew a blank, and I'm the older of the two, so I'm allowed to forget what I was saying.
Well, so we're going to be doing a weekly podcast.
Yes, we are.
And we are just in the beginning stages, but we're JFDI and perfectly imperfect. Perfectly imperfect.
Yes.
Imperfectly perfect.
We're perfect human beings in our imperfection.
Yes. Yes. And so, one of the quotes that we're going to discuss today, or that is our, not discussion, but is leading us today in this discussion.
Our guiding principle. Yeah.
A guiding principle.
You like that?
Yeah, I like that. Don't let yesterday take up too much of today. Quoted by Will Rogers.
Will Rogers. Yeah.
Will Rogers.
One of my favorite people. One of the things, one of the reasons that resonates for me is that in all of my career, no matter what I studied or what road I thought to take, I always came back to one principle. Every school of psychotherapy, every philosophy about living comes down to one thing, and that is be immediate, be right now, be in the day. And that living too much in the past or living too much in the future is a way to shore pain. So that when I read that, it really did resonate. Yep.
Well, and from the trauma that I the teachings of trauma that I've come from is, when we experience trauma, our brains automatically respond a certain way. And so a simple statement like that may seem simple to you after 55 years of, being in the work and seeing different ways to handle trauma. However, for a lot of people, they get so caught up in how things have to be. And so, and beating themselves up about yesterday that they don't appreciate the moment that they're in.
Right.
Right. And so a simple statement like that can actually take some different ways to handle it to get a different outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, like I know for me, like I like to have things organized. I like my checklist, and so, the new day that I start, is pretty contingent on yesterday, on what I accomplished and what I didn't, and then, what I need to do.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I can even feel myself go into the analysis paralysis, where I'm analyzing so much. You've never heard of that?
Yes, I have.
Okay. That I analyze it. So are you like, oh my goodness, yeah, Lana, I remember all those conversations that we had, and I was in that analysis, right? I mean, it makes me a good real estate broker. However, not so much in life to, to just function and go with the flow and not and live moment by moment, even, like this is from yesterday to today, but really it is moment to moment sometimes.
Should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get too careful. And part of the problem is occasionally still, I find myself repeating a series of responses that are very, very old responses. And that while they're very old, they really aren't time tested, because they usually tend not to be correct for the moment. But I'm so habituated sometimes to my response set that I'll do things that just don't work. And people will look at me and wonder, why are you talking like that? Or why are you doing that thing? Yeah. Yeah. And that really, if you must know, probably 85% of the people who came into my office were in that exact spot. That whatever it was that they were doing to get by is an old response set that doesn't work in the here and now.
Yeah.
The other 15% came in and wanted me to fix whatever happened in the past.
Mm.
And I couldn't do that. What I could do is help them to live more correctly in the present. But I could, and many of them got stuck because they said they couldn't live today until they rectified what happened yesterday.
Wow, that's not easy, impossible.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I recently just spoke to a woman who was oh, I should have done different things with my husband. We got divorced. I didn't even tell him why I wanted to get divorced, and now he's moved on, and now she's regretful. And it's like, well, okay, do you want to go back and tell him that now? No. Okay, so then you need to move forward, and then in your future relationships that your communication is key for you.
Mhm.
And she didn't want to do that either. She wanted to go back and have a redo. We can't do that. And so it's from this moment moving forward. And I think that people who are in that space of like, okay, I know I want to do things differently. I want to have different results in my life. However, they don't know where to go, or they don't know what to do. And so I think that's what we want to provide to people is
Mhm.
other ways to, to handle life, and different perspectives and different ways of doing things and different techniques and experiments. I call them exercises. You call them experiments.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, exercises works as well, because when you're exercising, you're not really in competition with yourself or with others. You're exercising, you're building up strength, you're learning more about your body.
I
and
like
about
that.
yourself.
I like
So
that.
exercise, experiment doesn't work.
Okay. Yeah.
So what do we have next on our list? Oh, I know. How did we get to where we are today? And we kind of touched on that, but you should start. What brought you from wherever it was you were way back when, to doing the kind of work you're doing right now?
I'd say my life.
Okay, maybe you want to explore that a little more.
The childhood trauma that I experienced as a kid, and then throughout my life. And I had I don't know if you've ever watched The Secret. However, in watching The Secret, I realized that there were certain ways that I could exercise my mind to create different results, and that I had more, more brain power than I realized. I don't think that we're necessarily taught how when we are intentional with our thoughts and with our minds, that we can create a different result. Like that was never taught to us in second grade or sixth grade or high school, at least not for me. And that, how I grew up, the experiences that I had really dictated the life that I was living, and that I could change that. And, I mean, I have my bachelor's degree in psychology, and then I've done, years since 2000 and I don't know,
And
5,
whenever.
yeah. Personal development, I just realized how, my family's conditioning, society's conditioning really molded who I am. And I didn't necessarily like that. And I wanted different results. And so I started exploring that myself and picking up different life tools to create more of what I want and take control of that.
I don't know if you know how insightful or courageous that is, that transition that you made. Because most of us, all of us, in order to be able to live life seamlessly, learn certain conditioned responses to stimuli. So something shows up in our, and in the past, there was a way that we always handled those. And so that's the way we're going to keep handling it. Most of us don't have an insight into that. Most of us think that's just the way I am. Well, it's actually not the way you are, it's what you learned. But you had that insight. And I don't know what kind of accident happened, happy accident happened in your life that let you have that. But isn't that cool?
Yeah. I'm grateful. I feel, like looking back, I feel like my mom always held that space for me to, not be in a box, and, not to conform, and not to have to play by, everybody else's rules. And so from that, it allowed me to explore more. And I didn't feel, and I think it was part of my personality too.
Mhm.
It was just part of who I was. That, really gave me that kind of inner gut, like nudge, like, oh, there's something more different, better out there for you.
There's something else that I noticed about you, if you don't mind my saying. So that there's this principle I learned in, I don't know, one of the schools I went to, about behavior being not right or wrong, but functional or dysfunctional. So the way I act, is it working or isn't it? Not am I right or am I wrong? Because if I go there, then all of a sudden I'm making judgments about my personhood and all that. But you don't do that. You don't do that. You are pretty lighthearted, and you're pretty straightforward about looking at yourself and about what you do and your willingness to change.
Well, and I feel I feel like, as well, like as far as at one point how I responded saved my life.
Mm,
Right, like the trauma response that I had at one point saved my life. However, it doesn't serve me currently. And so I don't know, it's just something within me that, I feel like, okay, this isn't a great time. However, it's bringing me to something new, right? Like I said to him just last week, the breakdown brings me through the breakthrough, right? And and surrendering and just kind of going with the flow, instead of getting into that analytical brain that I love so much, that kept me safe.
Mhm.
However, now is not serving me in certain ways.
Yeah, but look at the way you've re-engineered it. You've taken your analytical thought process and you've applied it to personal understanding about your own personal psychology. So you don't throw the tools away.
No,
No, but you sometimes repurpose them.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Repurpose and reuse.
Yes,
often.
ma'am. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
Oh, yeah, it's cool. I'm glad we're doing this podcast because I don't think we've had this conversation.
No,
No, we haven't.
no.
And there's probably more that we need to talk about, but let's go on to how I got here,
Yes.
which is fascinating. I came up in a family that was heavily invested in alcoholism. My bio dad was an alcoholic. My mom was not. However, she managed to divorce the alcoholic dad and marry another one. So I lived in a system that was deeply steeped in alcoholic behavior and codependent behavior. God love her, I think my mother died not being able to let go of it. But I also was very fortunate that I grew up in an enormous family. I mean, when we had a family reunion, a couple hundred people would show up. And there was not a single alcoholic in the whole group. And they were all just down to earth, middle Pennsylvania kind of family. So I always got exposed to both sides of that track. On the one side, I was given to understand that there wasn't a damn thing I couldn't do if I wanted to. And so, which meant I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't check myself. I did not try something new. That was a blessing. On the other hand, I spent a great deal of my life promising myself that I wasn't going to be like my father. And it's one of those circumstances where I spent so much time and so much energy invested in not being like him, obsessing not being like him, that ultimately at some point, obviously, we know what happened. And I became a raging, practicing alcoholic. I was also weirdly one of those things that they call a high functioning alcoholic, because during the worst of my alcoholism, I got 3 advanced degrees. God, I wonder how good it could have been if I hadn't been. But I also promised myself that I would never work in mental health or in alcoholism. So I went into engineering school, and I'm very techie, and my aptitude is around science and around math. And halfway through that degree, I realized that was not something I wanted to do the rest of my life. I was very fortunate. I was in a school that had a great psychologist who I sat down with, and she said, let's do some tests. And the test showed that I wanted to be a teacher, a social worker, a psychologist, or a counselor. And it felt so right when she said it that I changed my majors, and I got an undergraduate degree in psych, and really didn't stop until I had my PhD. And I must tell you that what happened when I was in undergraduate school was that I was in a class where we had to go and do a field placement, and they had a hat full of names of agencies, and we had to pick out a name, and we had to go and do 10 hours of service at one of these agencies. And there are 45 names in the hat, and one of them was an alcoholism agency. And guess who got? I did. At the time, I was married and I needed some income. So interestingly, after 10 hours there, they offered me a job that we would organize around my school schedule. And I've been doing mental health, chemical dependency work ever since.
Ever since you said you would never do it.
Ever, never. The one promise I made to myself is that I would never work with adolescents, because I think that's probably a diagnosis all of its own. I've been able to keep that promise. But I have been working in the field of mental health, chemical dependency for 55 years now. Yeah. And how did I get here? I had coffee with a bright woman one day, and we talked about a need and a desire to project ourselves into the real world and to talk to people who had been through circumstances like ours and to bring our learning and our skill and our caring to those folks.
Yeah, I remember we went out to lunch. We met over at the Olive Mill.
No, it wasn't.
Well, no, not about the podcast, about my nonprofit. And I was like, oh my goodness, you're a psychologist. I never thought of you like that because, you know, I've known you from real estate, didn't really know the work that you did. And then like we were online for lunch and I was like, oh my goodness.
Are there any accidents?
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think so. No coincidences. No.
Now, one of the great early psychologists had a rule called synchronicity, that things happen.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I don't remember the conversation about the podcast.
We were in a coffee shop.
In Starbucks?
Yes, we were in Starbucks. Yes, we were. We were in Starbucks and we were having a cup of coffee and a little Danish, and that's when the conversation evolved into, this is who I am, this is what I've got, this is what I want to do. It was later that we had that podcast conversation.
Yes.
But that conversation about our personal experiences and about our professional experiences was very illuminating.
Yes, I remember now. Yeah. Yeah.
It's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's evolved for us, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened right about that time, you talk about interesting coincidences. I had sold my private practice to someone who pretty much destroyed it within about 3 years. But once I sold my private practice, I started getting phone calls. And people would say to me, hey, Bill, now that you're not busy anymore, could you? And what had ended up happening was I'd always done a little bit of public speaking and training at schools and stuff. And what had happened was that just exploded. And I realized that though I wasn't doing formal psychotherapy anymore, that I still had all this information that I needed to share. And you gave me that opportunity.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And different venues as well, right? Not just on stage, but through online and the different social media platforms.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes. And this is we have a plan to evolve this.
Yes.
Yes, I hope. So what else do we have to talk about?
If we go back to the quote to don't let yesterday take up too much of today, you know, just that I feel, you know, moment by moment we can change our choice. And
as they say in 12-step programs, one day at a time.
One day at a time, sometimes moment by moment though, right? Like 1 24-hour time frame might be too much for somebody to take on. So moment by moment. And remember that.
I have you may not know this, but fully 95% of individuals with a drug or alcohol problem also have a diagnosable mental health problem, usually anxiety disorder, not surprising, or depression. And there was this really cool social worker that offered me a job one time when I was in Arkansas, and he said he was talking about those two problems, and that in fact depression usually came from living too much in the past, and anxiety came from anticipating too much the future.
Yeah.
And that really there wasn't any real world about either of those. Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking about the other night, as long as I'm free associating, is that depression, many people get treated for depression nowadays with medication. But the truth of the matter is, we have been very, very successful in treating depression with self-directed cognitive behavioral therapies. People going out there and changing the way they live, the way they think, and so on. In fact, NIMH just did a study that showed that talk therapy, self-driven therapy, is more effective than medication and more durable.
We don't want people to stop taking their medications though,
Never.
until they've gotten
No.
some things in place to.
But what has happened is the opposite. People start taking medication and think they don't have to make change efforts, that they stop their therapy, or they stop their counseling, or they stop their self-help group.
They've got to keep that all
All right.
going. Yep.
There's a role for everything. It's just that once you've taken the medication, it's not a magic pill. What it does is it gives you breathing room to make the changes you need to make.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know I read an article too where they said being in nature and then having a community of people around you, of loving, supportive people, can really make a difference in your mindset.
Well, isn't that one of the core concepts of self-help groups?
Mm.
Yeah. What's an interesting thing? I was reading an article, I don't know, 10 years ago, and it was a study about depression, and they found that they listed these things that were effective in helping people to deal with their depression, and like number 2 or number 3 was music.
Mm-hmm.
Music, don't you know?
Yep.
Yes, and one of the things that we started doing, because we were trying to help people set up treatment programs for people with co-occurring disorders, is we would say to them, and it tells you how long ago this was, well, give everybody their own personal disc player and let them pick their own discs, so that when they're walking around, they're listening to music, when they're in between classes or groups or whatever.
Yep. Yep.
And it really did. They actually did a study of their treatment outcomes before they started people on music, and then after they had them on music, and they got about a 20% increase in effectiveness.
Okay.
Just
I
from
believe
music.
it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know I feel 20% better when I'm listening to music.
Well, I will own this, that when I'm a little bit depressed, I have a depression set. Long before they had playlists, when I go with the computer, I had a depression set, and it was these 7 songs that are the most powerfully, awfully weeping into your shirt kind of sad song.
Okay.
Always lifted my depression.
Really?
Oh, honest to God, yes. Oh, yeah. And talked about suicide and people being buried and folks walking on their grave, and just terrible, terrible depressed stuff. But it worked for me.
Yeah.
And that was the other lesson that I learned from that, is that I can't tell you what kind of music's going to work for you.
Yeah, see, I'm more of the, like the disco kind of dance around and get happy music. That's my happy place.
I just never thought of you as a disco guy.
Oh,
Really? God.
Have you never seen the picture of my fro? I have it on social. You're not on social media.
No, I'm not on social media, and maybe I shouldn't.
That's okay. I'll have to show you anyway.
Well, then I'll show you pictures of me when I had hair.
Perfect.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Get it up.
Okay. So we should be about done now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do we sign off?
Well, we'll see you next week, and we'll figure out the specifics.
Why don't we ask them the riddle about the elephants?
Okay.
Do you know why elephants don't hide in trees?
I don't know. Why don't they hide in trees?
No, they do hide in trees. I'm sorry. I screwed up the joke. Why do you never see elephants hiding in trees?
Okay, well, why do we never see elephants in trees? I don't know.
Because they're very good at it. See you next time.
Well, maybe you should come up with some better jokes.
It's hard finding really good, clean jokes.
It is.
It is.
It is.
So you're going to have to.
Well, who says we have to keep them clean?
Well, probably should.
Maybe for the most part.
My sister may look at this.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for joining us.